Welcome, everyone. My name is Grant Salisbury, and I run marketing here at Service Channel. And I'm pleased to be joined by Mark Hawker. Mark, it's a real pleasure to have you with us today. You're someone who spent 30 years working at the intersection of sustainability and facilities, had leadership roles at some really amazing companies, and now advise some of the largest companies in the world about how to approach sustainability. So, to kick us off, could you give us a bit about yourself and Emphasis?
Thank you. I'm a professional engineer, third generation, so it's in the DNA. I did a university degree in mechanical engineering, then trained as a design engineer, and then for 15 years worked. What initially when I started was Guinness, and then became Diageo, and worked with them internationally. So I worked for them in the UK, worked for them in Africa, which are quite large beer markets for them, and in the Caribbean. And in the midst of that, around about the mid-90s, swapped from doing engineering projects into doing engineering operations, trained as a Six Sigma black belt, and really then got involved in taking energy, which was important at that time, and more importantly now, carbon out of the business. So I've been doing this since about 1995. Having worked at Diageo for 15 years, I did a couple of years with Carlsberg as a technical director doing something very similar, and decided to make a change and joined Tesco as their head of engineering in 2007. Was with them for a couple of years, and then I moved to Sainsbury's, another large retailer in the UK, and I was with them from 2009 to 2018. And all of that time, the work I was doing was around decarbonising the business, either as energy or with refrigerants. In 2018, I decided after 10 years of retail, it was time to do something else. So I joined Anthesis. Anthesis is a sustainability consultancy. The reason I came here, we do a lot of different things with many different people. So every day is a new day. It's quite interesting. In terms of who Anthesis are, we're a sustainability consultancy. We've got people dotted from America, California, all the way through to China across the world. We're a group of largely scientists with a small spattering of engineers amongst us. And the things we do for business are helping businesses understand their carbon footprint, help them do things like set science-based targets, decarbonisation strategies, deal with waste, deal with carbon reduction strategies, deal with circularity, so how do you recycle goods, green building strategy, renewable energy and renewable energy procurement, environmental certification, and the area I generally work with is decarbonisation of businesses or buildings and decarbonisation of business processes.
Mark, I know you and Anthesis have a strong conviction about the environmental and business case for sustainability, but maybe to just set some high level context for this audience, why should companies care about sustainability? And as you kind of unpack that for us, what's the biggest misconception that you've encountered in your work as companies think about sustainability?
Okay. I think the first thing I would say on that is if you look at the climate, something's changing. So if you look at wildfires in the States, Australia, around the Mediterranean in Europe, Siberia, something's changed to drive that situation for those to happen. And then if you look at polar ice, both the Antarctic and the Arctic, again, a lot of polar ice is gone, and that's causing all sorts of changes. So with that in mind, the whole bunch of people, all of us Anthesis, to some extent or another, believe that this is a decisive decade. Things are changing and are starting to roll away from us. And if we don't do something quickly, then we're not going to be in a position to stop it. So it's time to do something now for our children or our grandchildren, but actually I probably believe it's for my kids. It's happening quite quickly. The second thing is, having been doing this since 1995, I've learned decarbonising businesses makes good commercial sense. You can deliver paybacks of 5 years, and so that's an IRR of about 10%. And if you can communicate that to people commercially, then sustainability starts to make sense. And that's probably a second point I would make, is actually I find it ironic when we go and do presentations to clients. They're often, when we're presenting our findings, quite surprised that we start with the commercial position for this is this. So if you carry out this project, it'll cost you this amount of money. Here's the financial payback. Here's the IRR. So sustainability can be, my experience over the last 20 or 30 years, is good commercial business.
Yeah, I really appreciate that sentiment of doing well by doing good. And as we kind of go a level deeper, talk to me about the framework that you've put into place, that you've developed for how to go from kind of ideation and evaluation through execution at the companies you've worked at and advised.
So the first thing is to have a proper process for sustainability, and that's you need to look at engineering and innovation. You need to look at energy efficiency. You need to look at reducing your water consumption. So, I'll give you an idea. In the UK, back in 2010, we started collecting rainwater on stores for flushing toilets. It's the only thing we used it for, but it was a significant water consumption, and it used a natural resource for something that needs to be done. And then looking at waste reduction, and if you can't reduce the waste levels, then looking to use it usefully. And the tier of tools you use, first of all, look at the resource and see whether you need to use it at all. If you do need to use it, can you use it more efficiently? Can you reuse and recycle it? And then actually, if you still have to use it, the thing that you're using, can you use something that's less polluting? The next thing is to understand where you're starting from. So in terms of the utilities that you're using, how much of it is electricity, how much of it is gas, how much of the for a retailer, how much of it is refrigerant gas, because that's a considerable carbon footprint that isn't obvious unless you understand it. And then taking an electricity example, how much are you using for fridge, how much are you using for heating and ventilation, how much are you using for lighting, if you're doing baking, how much are you using for a bakery, and what other uses have you got? And then what tools can you apply to those things to get them down? So lighting, can I use natural lighting? Can I use LED lighting to get the levels down? With things like back of house, there's a lot of good transformer technology around, which has come onto the market in the last 10 years, like amorphous metal transformers. Can you use those? IE5 electric motors, which are sort of the latest thing and far more efficient than traditional motors. Renewables such as photovoltaics, and then for refrigeration, effective controls, variable speed drives, doors, aerofoils, blinds, natural refrigerants, then heating and ventilation, good R value for the building, good air sealing, ventilation and heat recovery, and then looking at your fuels. Can you use biofuels or can you use heat pumps? And for all of those things, having in place effective monitoring and maintenance systems to keep them going.
So there's so many great ideas and innovations out there in the market today. You reeled off a whole bunch of them. Um, Talk to me about the process you use for winnowing it down to the stuff that's actually going to work at scale and that's going to actually have an ROI for the business. I know you have this concept of a Shark Tank process. What does that entail?
So I've used it in a couple of businesses, but probably the one we used it longest for was at Sainsbury's. So we had a Shark Tank process. We had people who had ideas, who brought them in. We just asked them to do a presentation, keep it brief. Sort of the benchmark we used, I was probably going to say, was probably no more sophisticated than high school physics. And we had ideas come in. When you basically benchmark them against, does this make sense? We generally found a third of them, they were interesting ideas, but they didn't stack up. The physics weren't right, or the physics or the maths just didn't work. A third of them had some potential, and a third of them made good sense. So the ones that had potential, we tested. The ones that made good sense, we tested. We did everything through a pilot. We try it maybe on a couple of sites, maybe on half a dozen sites, and prove whether it worked or not. If it did work, then we would take it forward. Um, if it was a really easy decision, we'd roll it out. If it's something more complicated, we'd do more pilots or a limited rollout and learn things about equipment behaviour, maintenance, and other things we need to do to actually, when we go to a full-scale rollout, we're not going to have other problems. And then when you get to the full-scale rollout, you can make sure you've got the right controls and monitoring in place, and then also make sure you've got the right maintenance and spares in place. So if I take CO2 for refrigeration as an example, where you're dealing with an HFC system that's running at 3.5 bar, and you're suddenly dealing with a CO2 system that's running at 100 bar, so it's 30 times the pressure roughly. There was a lot of fear in the industry from technicians about working with that. So Sainsbury's funded a training program for technicians so they could learn about CO2 to take the fear out of it. So when they met it in the field, it wasn't scary anymore. So it's about managing the process and managing the change so you don't get any unintended consequences.
Mark, can you share a couple of success stories that really stand out to you about how sustainability initiatives have worked in practice and the payoff from them?
Yeah, if I think back over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of innovation and change. If I look at products that didn't exist in 2010 and exist now, ground source heat pumps, where you drill holes into the ground about 700 feet, and during the winter you pump heat out and use to heat a building. And for a retailer in the summer, you take heat from your refrigeration systems and use the ground to condense it, giving you a 15% energy saving. That idea didn't exist. It was piloted and proven, and then I was involved in doing several more pilots on that to prove what was a robust design. And so over the course of several years, we ran out 35 systems like that. Another thing that 2015, 2016, we were approached by somebody with the idea of using ticket strips in the shape of an aerofoil on fridge cabinets to save energy. Again, nothing wrong with the idea. We connected him to Williams Motor Racing, who were running an innovation catapult. Did some trials with some refrigeration and cabinet manufacturers, and having piloted the idea, that idea is rolled out, and that business now is selling aerofoils to Walmart, number of retailers in the States, all over Europe, and companies like Coles and others in Australia. So that product's gone global. And more recently, and it's a newer product, we've been working with a company called Naked Energy, who came up with a hybrid solar thermal system, which is part PV, so it generates electricity, and part solar thermal, it generates hot water. The idea there is by cooling the PVs down with the water, they work more efficiently, and you get the byproduct of heat. So those are things that didn't exist. If you look at CO2 refrigeration back in 2010, we could build it, but it was 30 to 40% more expensive than an HFC equivalent. It took 2 years work and piloting to get it down to something that was commercially comparable to an HFC system and running at the same energy, and then it could be rolled out at scale. And I've got similar experience with LED lighting, or even PVs, which is a commoditized product for a long time. When you introduce it into your state, it's a good idea to pilot so you learn any of the pitfalls in it before you've got it on 200 or 300 sites. And in a pilot, it's a small problem. When you've rolled it to 200, 300 sites, it's a really big problem. So if you take that example, when I say we worked at Sainsbury's, and this is published, they took a 200 million green loan to fund this, and over the space of about 8 years, it reduced the company's carbon footprint by 13%, even though the business in terms of square feet had grown by 40%, but it also delivered good commercial returns. So the payback was around about that 5-year figure I was talking about.
Yeah, those are really fantastic examples, and I like how you divided it between kind of pure play innovation, the things that are really forward leaning and stuff that many in this audience can think about as achievable in the very near future. Um, as we draw to a close here, what are the key things that you encourage our audience to remember? I mean, if they could only remember one or two things walking away from this session about sustainability, what would those be?
I think the first point was that point I made about climate change. It's happening. So you only have to look at polar ice or wildfires all over the world. Something's changing. Um, if we don't do something about it soon, then we won't be able to turn it back. It will just continue. You're seeing things through Consumer Goods Forum, and as I said, the National Retail Federation and other bodies in the States who've got concerns about this as well, and things are happening. So, as I said, antithesis, as with many other beliefs, this is a decisive decade. We need to do something, certainly for our children, if not our grandchildren. I think it's going to affect it's going to affect our kids. And it's important to understand that actually taking part in sustainability can be good commercial business. You can get a good payback out of it or good IRR if you do it properly. And also, when you introduce it, make sure you do it in the right way so you don't get any unintended consequences.
Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to the audience for giving us a good listen. And we'll end there.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. We really appreciate it.